Hey everyone, so glad you're joining us on the Farm Business Management Career Development Event team. I'm really excited to have this team. One of my favorite subjects is agriculture economics, so we're going to have a great time together studying and preparing for this competition. The purpose of this presentation is to provide you with an overview of the career development event and also to give you some information and resources that can help you be successful as you can be in this career development event. All right, so we have a couple of key objectives that we want to accomplish here in this presentation. First, I can articulate the key components of the Farm Business Management or FBM Career Development Event. I can locate and organize resources that are helpful for preparing for this CDE. I can demonstrate study skills to be successful in the CDE. And lastly, I can recall basic terminology relating to the CDE. So our roadmap for today is basically to break down the contest, learn a little bit more about how to be successful, get some study skills, and lastly, we'll start diving into some of the content that's important to know as the foundation for the CDE. All right, so just an overview of the career development event itself. The career development event is broken down into two key parts. The first part is an exam, and it's a 50-question objective-based exam, which means the questions are going to be multiple choice, matching, true, false. There's going to be a right or wrong concrete answer, and that will be 100 points. So each question's 2 points a pop. You'll get an hour to do that by yourself, and after that time is expired, you will then move on to the practicum. The practicum is where you actually apply those concepts that you demonstrate on the exam to a real-life scenario. So what will happen is there'll be a 100-question exam, but it's going to be based off of a data set that's provided. So the data will relate to a beef, dairy, or hog farm, along with any crops that are also grown on that farm. And you'll basically get about 30 to 40 pages of financial information from that farm, and the practicum will be broken down into sections. So there'll be a section on the overview section of the financial reports. There'll be a section on the income statement. There'll be a section on the financials areas. So you'll basically look at those different sections as directed on the practicum and answer the questions using the formulas and information that you know about farm business management. And again, 100 questions, 2 points a pop, therefore 200 points. So the team is comprised of 5 members here at the region level competition, but as you advance, you're looking at up to 4 members per team. The top 3 scores count toward the overall score. So the lowest score then is dropped. So there's no team component in this CDE, at least at a regional and state level. And because there's 3 students on a team and each student is worth up to 300 maximum points, that means that you can earn up to 900 points in the career development event. So the test is about 33% of the score and the practicum is the remainder, 67% of the score. So it's very important that as you prepare for this competition, you study not only the economic terms, but also how to utilize those practicums, which is what we're going to talk about here in a little bit. So as always, there's a lot of resources that are available to help you succeed in the CDE. cde.ffa.umn.edu along with ffa.org. So we're going to take a look at both of those links here in a second. I also have a variety of textbooks available in the classroom that you guys can check out and take a look at. That'll be a lot more helpful too, especially when it comes time preparing for the exam. And similarly, Quizlet is also a great resource. So if you do Google search on Farm Business Management CDE Quizlet, you'll find a couple of Quizlets that are pretty good, and I have a couple recommendations that I can give you all as well when we get closer. But let's take a look at these 2 links. So the first one is cde.ffa.umn.edu. This website is probably familiar to a couple of you. There are a lot of links on here, as we can see. So we see our rules page, and the rules page has all of the rules for the different competitions, whether it's agriculture communications or whether it's milk quality and products or anything in between. There's all of them available to you. But we're mainly concerned, obviously, with farm business management. So this is the current updated rules for the contest, basically what I just told you. So you can verify that information on this sheet, nice and short, only 1 page. I think it's one of the only CDEs that's that short, which is always a good thing. And then you can look back at old exams here. So 2013 all the way until 2019, and there hasn't really been that much change over those years in what the CDE has entailed. It's always been a practicum and it's always been an exam. So you can go through here, and let's say I want to look at the 2016 exam. I can go ahead and go to Farm Business Management Exam and Practicum and take a look at those materials. So as you can see, this is the practicum. It's about 30 pages long with all of those economic pages, and then it'll ask you those questions at the end. Obviously this one has an answer key on it too, but There's the state level comp test materials, and there's also regional and invitational materials that are available to you as well on some years. So this is a great resource to check out. And some additional resources would also be the national FFA website, which we'll head to next. Now, keep in mind the rules and the procedures at the national level are a little bit different than how we run things here at state and regionals, but nevertheless, there are some good resources that are available. If you go to event resources and check out the past tests and practicum section, you'll be able to see old tests and financial analysis issues. Obviously, we don't have a team activity here, so we don't have to worry about that. You can look at the past test and resource information to help you out. But for now, I would stick mainly to the state materials. Okay, so those are some of the resources that are available to you, and obviously, I'm more than willing to scout out some additional resources and share them with you as we get closer to the contest. All right, so just like anything, it's always important to study in order to prepare. Like I always say with the Parley kids, you practice how you perform. So I have a couple of study tips I want to share with you guys. I personally have not competed in this event as a student, but I've seen several other students compete in it over my time with an FFA and with my practicums in college, and it's a beast. There's a lot of components to it. And a lot of math to it. So let's take a look at these top 5 tips. So number 5, print off old practicums and work through them, and really work through them. Try to do the math, show your work, and know where you went wrong. And I'll explain a little bit later what I mean by that. But basically, the only way to practice for this contest is just to sit down with some old practicums and work through them. And the nice thing about this contest is that the numbers all kind of blend together a little bit, so you could go back a few years later or a few weeks later and redo a practicum you did and probably not remember any of the answers because it's just a bunch of numbers and you're not going to remember them. So you can kind of go back and redo things as needed, which is awesome. So print off those practicums and work through them as best as you can. Number 4, use the definitions page on the practicum cover. So you won't get this on the exam, but on the practicum, there will be a page before you flip open and see the data set that you can check out, and it'll have some key definitions and formulas that you can utilize. And I have a screenshot of that coming up here in a little bit that we can discuss and look at, but use that to your advantage. Don't forget that it's there. I've seen some people just even rip off that first sheet and have it flat down right next to them as they do the practicum so they remember what all of the abbreviations and formulas are. Number 3, as you're studying, follow the time limits for each area. So you only have an hour to do the written exam and you have 2 hours for the practicum. So when you're studying at home, be sure to follow those time limits so that you're not pressed for time at the regional or state competition. Number 2, when you're done with the practicum, I'm going to want us to review it as a team, but if you want to see how you did immediately, I'll send out an answer key and correct the answers yourself if you want to, because it's multiple choice. But if you get something wrong, or even if you just guess on something, find out why the answers are wrong, or find out why the answer is the answer it is, simply because it will enable you to see your learning kind of come to life a little bit. So just try to find out why things are wrong, because you'll see that over time the exams and practicums kind of don't really change that much. They can't really ask you that many different questions about the data set. So if you know how to figure out one calculation in 2019, they might ask you the same question in 2020. So just with different numbers, obviously. So just study how to calculate the different formulas and questions, and you might be surprised at how much repeats itself. And lastly, arguably one of the most important tips is know your basic economic terms. And obviously the exam is only valued at 100 points a pop, but those economic terms will show up again in the practicum. So knowing things like opportunity cost, supply, demand, futures, options, things like that, that will be very helpful, and we'll go over that in practice quite a bit. So even a little bit today. So speaking of that, terms to know, I have about 10 different terms just to start you guys off with that are going to be really important, kind of to serve as that foundation of the pyramid of this competition. So one of my favorite is opportunity cost, so the value of the next best option. So right now I'm sitting on my couch. I could be drinking this nice tall glass of chocolate milk, Or I could be working with farm business management contests, which I am right now. So here, my opportunity cost would be drinking that nice ice cold glass of chocolate milk and watching The Office. But I'm choosing to be here, so that is what I'm giving up. So the value of the next best option that you have right now. Supply is the amount of a product that can be supplied by the producers or farmers or companies. And demand, on the other hand, is the amount of product that is demanded or requested by the consumer at any given moment. Supply and demand are constantly shifting. They're never going to be constant. So it's important that as economists and as farm business managers, we are considering the needs of the public while also what we can realistically supply as the producers, okay? So equilibrium, though, can happen in some markets, and that's when supply and demand intersect and meet in harmony. So we're going to go a little bit more in depth with supply and demand as we start practicing, but basically supply and demand is plotted on a graph. Okay, so your y-axis, or the one that goes up and down, is going to be your price, and your x-axis is going to be your quantity. Okay, supply is the line that goes up and slopes upward, supply to the sky, and then demand slopes downward, demand to the dumps. Supply to the sky, demand to the dumps. When both of those lines meet, it forms an X. That is equilibrium. That is the perfect level of supply and demand, and that will tell you the quantity that needs to be produced and the price that it needs to be sold at, because if we have more demand or more supply, that can lead to a shortage or a surplus. So a shortage is when there is not enough of a resource. So shortages then cause prices in the market to drive upward because the resources are scarce. Okay, surpluses, on the other hand, means we produced too much of a resource. So therefore, the value is going to go down and our price will go down. Okay, so it's important that we don't produce too much of a good, because then we're going to actually lose material value over time. Whereas if we have a shortage, it's going to cost a lot of money for them to purchase it, and therefore we're not going to make as much money either. So trying to get as close to equilibrium as we can for what consumers are willing and able to pay for a product is very important. Okay, then we have asset, liability, current, and non-current. So an asset is something that adds value to a business or operation. So something that we have that's tangible, or maybe even intangible too, that adds value, economic value to what we're doing. So whether that be a tractor, a piece of equipment that we have, or extra cash that we have in the bank, or notes receivable, okay? These are all assets and things that we have that add value to what we're doing. Okay, liability on the other hand is a financial obligation from one party to another. So when I go borrow money from the bank, take out a loan, that is a liability. That's something I need to pay back. That's something that I owe. Okay, so the key thing to remember is that assets plus liability equals stockholders' equity. Okay, current is when there is a financial asset or a liability to be incurred within the next calendar year. So that's something that we have on hand that needs to be addressed or cashed in within a year. And non-current is something that's a little bit more long-term. So a financial asset or liability that will be incurred past 1 year. Okay, the other thing I'm going to add to this list too that isn't on here that I'm thinking about now that I'm talking is depreciation. So depreciation is when we have a really expensive good in the beginning, and it kind of loses its value over time. So think of a car, for example, or a tractor, or a computer, or something. It loses value over time. Like, don't get this confused with antique goods, obviously, but some things, when we get wear and tear on them, they begin to lose material value. That is called depreciation. So that's something that we'll talk about a little bit later as well. But this is the terminology and definitions cheat sheet that you get at the front of your practicum. So see here we have the abbreviation for bushels, yields. All of these things are all going to be provided to you on your practicum, but not on your exam. So it's good to know this stuff, but if in the event that you get confused on your practicum, you'll be able to look at this. And it also has information on how to round things, because that's always important to know how to do as well. So as we wrap up, hopefully now you can articulate the key components of the competition, locate and organize resources that are helpful for preparing for this competition, demonstrate study skills, and also recall the basic terminology relating to this event. I hope you found this to be very helpful. Again, I'm very excited to work with each of you. It's going to be a lot of fun. You're going to learn a lot of great things and hopefully learn some information that you could use, whether you work on a farm or not. this will be great information for yourself, but also for when you're filing for taxes and things as an adult. So excited. I'll see you at practice pretty quick.